Hello everyone. Today I will be returning to the Akizuki, a ship that I quite enjoy, and a ship that I have changed my build on a bit as of late because of the way they have changed IFHE, or well, buffed IFHE. Matchmaking is mostly tier 8, tier 9, so I mean you're up tiered a bit, but that's pretty common. Now let's start off with the obvious, the Akizuki. What is it good at? It's good at being quite tanky. It's good at having a lot of firepower or having a lot of guns. And it's actually really stealthy. At 5.9 km concealment, you are really good at getting close to enemy DDs. Now what isn't it good at? It's absolutely painfully slow. It does 33 knots. That's without speed flag or speed boost. 33 knots. Kagero, even slower DDs, well, I mean slower and slower. The Benson does 38, that's 5 knots faster. The Kiev does what, 32.5? Ognevoy does 37. So doing 33 knots, you are by far the slowest destroyer of them all. You are the slowest DD of the pack. Even the Kagero does 35. So by far, you're the slowest tier 8 destroyer of them all. However, what you lack in speed, you make up in raw firepower. These guns reload extremely fast, and the amount of damage you can pump out with them allows you to pretty much dominate any other DD in a straight up gunfight. There is no one who can really stand toe to toe with you, especially if you run the build that I recommend, which includes running Survivability Expert. You of course have 23k health, which is so much more than pretty much any of your competition can really put up with. So you are very tanky with a lot of firepower. Now that's not to say that this firepower comes for free. In fact, if we were to look at the guns on the ship, you might notice that the Akizuki actually only has 100mm guns. Now the HE Alpha is pretty pitiful, 1.2k, but more importantly than that, the HE pen on the Akizuki is dreadful. In fact, if we do our basic math, we know this has 100mm guns, so we divide 100mm by 6, and we get 16.666666 and so forth. So that means we can pen 16mm of armor in this with the HE. And that is of course far too little. Even the superstructures on battleships are 90mm of armor. Most DDs of the same tier and higher that we face have like 19 to 21mm armor all over their hulls and pretty much everywhere. So our HE would actually shatter if we didn't use IFHE. So IFHE is actually one of those perks that was pretty much introduced into the game and with the Akizuki in mind. So there's a reason that I've always recommended IFHE on Akizuki. It's an absolute staple skill for this destroyer. It has always been a huge part of this DD and it has always been recommended. So what exactly has changed as of late? Well, they have buffed it. They have buffed the way the IFHE works. For guns that are 139mm and smaller, they have reduced the debuff, the fire chance debuff that IFHE causes. In the past, if you spec'd IFHE, you gave up 3% fire chance on the Akizuki. These days, you only give up 1% fire chance. So what this does translate to is pretty much a raw 2% fire chance buff for the Akizuki. Now, you might go, well, 2%, that doesn't sound like too much. But then you gotta consider that with the old build on the Akizuki, even when running fire chance flags, you had a 3% fire chance. Okay? 3%. So this IFHE buff changes that 3% fire chance to 5%. So that's already a massive increase in how many fires you'll be getting every single game. That alone is already a huge increase. And that also opens up a completely new window of being able to spec into a more versatile role. Now I will recommend, I will link in the comments below, I will link my previous Akizuki commentary, because you can still play the Akizuki exactly that way with this build, and it's still an extremely good way of playing the Akizuki. And in fact, you see me doing very much the basics that I do I did in that commentary. You see me doing in this game as well, and that is of course pushing caps, contesting cap points, and just fighting, duking it out with enemy DDs because of how strong you are at fighting against enemy DDs. However, this IFHE change means that the fire chance, which I pretty much scoffed at, which I pretty much ignored because it was simply completely too unreliable to in any way base a build upon, has now become a real option. since with the addition of this increased fire chance, if we now spec Demolition Expert as well, we can actually reach a 7% fire chance. And now you gotta consider that the reload on these guns is 3 seconds. And 3-second reload, 8 guns, 7% fire chance per shell. We're actually starting to think about, we're actually starting to become a real fire starting destroyer, which makes it very interesting because that means the Akizuki has a lot more versatility. It means that we no longer have to constrict ourselves into this purely anti-DD role, but we can in fact start picking fights with a lot of different targets and starting fires on a lot of different targets. And that's why I ultimately decided to spec out of RPF, or radio location as it's called, and that freed up 4 points. I also decided to spec out of priority target, which is another 3 point. So that gives us 5 points, and those 5 additional points I have instead spec'd into Demolition Expert. So compared to the old Akizuki that had 3% fire chance, I now have 7% fire chance. Also, the remaining 2 points I spec'd into Adrenaline Rush, which means that the longer the game goes on and the lower HP you get, the faster your reload becomes. So instead of having the 3-second reload, the lower my health pool gets, the faster and faster and faster this reload will become. And of course, thanks to this increased fire chance, the better of a fire starter you will also become. So this change in the Akizuki build, even though it's based on such a small buff to IFHE, has allowed the Akizuki to become a lot more versatile. You're no longer tunnel visioned or pigeonholed into playing this one specific role, and if you try to play anything else you will kind of not be able to do too much. You have gotten a lot more freedom. The playstyle of the ship hasn't really changed too much though. You still want to shoot AP at broadsides, you still want to spam HE at superstructures only, because that's the only thing that your weak HE can pen, even if you're running IFHE, which I of course highly recommend. Your torpedoes, you only have 4 of them, so you have to use your torpedo booster a lot to get a lot of damage out of them, but they are hard-hitting torps, and all you really want is that one flood, because now when you're actually a very good fire starter, that one flood means that you can smoke up and you can starting a lot of fires after they have repaired. So a lot of more versatility available to us now. And in general, I think the Akizuki has become more fun to play. That is, of course, that doesn't change that sailing around in the open and gunboating like I'm doing now right now, it's not recommended early on in the game. In fact, the only reason I do it here is because I'm fairly certain that if they start focusing me a lot, I can disengage and survive, because I still have 13k health left. But this kind of gameplay doesn't really work that well for the Akizuki. This is Russian DD gameplay, sailing around in the open and gunboating. It doesn't work in the Akizuki because the Akizuki is, as I said, it's the slowest destroyer. It's quite a large destroyer, and it has an absolutely abysmal turning circle. You have a 730 meter turning circle. Even the Kiev has a 690 meter turning circle. So you have by far the worst turning circle out of them all. So when the St. Louis turns around and starts heavily focusing me, I stop firing so I get undetected, and then I aim to the far left. I'm actually not aiming torps at the Bismarck, since they are only 10 km torps. I'm aiming them at the St. Louis, because I know that if I stop firing I will get undetected, and when I get undetected the St. Louis will have no reason to chase me and sail this way anymore, and he will turn most likely to the left into cover behind the island, which of course will put him right into the path of my torpedoes. So you can't launch these 8 torpedo volleys that often, but with the consumables you can do it every now and then, but you usually don't really need them too much. Okay, I'm trying to bait him into maybe focusing more on me, but he has probably spotted my torps already, but it was too late because I kind of baited him into those torpedoes and he ends up eating them. So the torpedoes are still not that strong. I mean, they're not that valuable, but well-placed torpedoes, scoring one or a couple of hits here and there, can still be a very, very strong additional tool to this ship. Mostly though, you want to be playing around these guns as much as possible. This new build that I've changed to, I actually really like it. In general, it feels like an overall buff to the way the Akizuki plays. I mean, of course you lose some combative ability against enemy DDs when you give up RPF. RPF is very, very useful when you want to play a pure DD hunter. That's of course why I used it on my previous build, because the only thing that the Akizuki was truly good at before this IFHE buff was killing other DDs. And RPF is of course one of the best tools in the game for purely hunting down and killing enemy DDs. But this change in IFHE means that we have wider options available to our Akizuki, and while I still play very similarly as I did in the previous commentary, that is contesting capture points and focusing on enemy DDs mostly, you still now have options. You have wider gameplay options, and in overall the ship is just more enjoyable, more fun, I would say. So I do really like these changes. This game does end. The damage, well, almost about to end. This guy's about to die. He's slowly, very slowly burning to death, and there he goes. The game does end, and the damage, I mean, not perhaps the most amazing damage, 130k damage, but I was being mostly against higher tiers, and more importantly, I did secure the B cap, which is one of the harder caps, and I got to show off a lot of the new strengths of this ship. Only 5 fires, which isn't that much, but hopefully I'm actually going to be featuring probably another 1 or 2 commentaries on the new Akizuki. See if I can show off this new improved fire chance a bit more, because it really does help the way you accumulate damage and in general your utility. Detail report wise, 2.4k base, which is pretty nice. The Akizuki is still a strong ship. Well, it was a strong ship before this, but with the buff it's an even stronger ship. So this was pretty much just a straight up buff, and I don't mind too much because I think the Akizuki is quite a fun ship. It has some very clear weaknesses. It's big, it's slow, it's clumsy, and it doesn't have too much torpedo power, but in return it gets a ton of gun power. Well, as long as you spec IFHE, it gets a ton of gun power to compensate. So it's a very straightforward DD in that sense. I don't think it's overpowered, and I don't think it's too weak. I think it's in a really good position, and that's the kind of stuff I really want to see, or that's the kind of ships I really enjoy. Ships that have these very distinct features. Detailed report wise, well, torpedoes netted me, what, 65k damage, and gun power netted me, what, 42k plus about 15k, so 57k. So I got a bit more torpedo damage than I probably would normally get, or like higher percentage of torpedo damage. Usually the higher percentage comes from the guns themselves. Only about 15k fire damage, but as I said, this is one of the early games after I've switched to this build, and I have played a bit more and really enjoyed it. So hopefully I'll be able to show some better games where you can really see the difference. Anyway, let me move on to my new recommended build for the Akizuki. Alright, as usual, starting with the modules. The pretty much straightforward upgrade here is go for the hull first. It gives you so much. It gives you health, it gives you AA, it gives you maneuverability. Very straightforward upgrade. The torpedo upgrade, while nice, doesn't really change the way you use these torpedoes at all. You gain some alpha, or a nice amount of alpha to be fair, and you gain a bit of torpedo speed, but considering how small of a part the torps really are, I would probably go for the range upgrade first and then get the torps. Don't get me wrong, both upgrades are worth getting, but I would recommend getting range first, since the guns are kind of still your bread and butter for this type of ship. Consumable wise, premium smoke, absolutely recommended. I would say a premium torpedo reload booster, simply because the difference in time or cooldown is so massive, and having an additional one is so important. And if you can afford it, premium damage control for the faster cooldown will greatly enhance your survivability. Upgrade wise, priority 1, main armament, keep your turrets and torpedo tubes alive. Additional AA range, very straightforward. Your AA is actually very strong on the ship for a destroyer, so increasing the base range to 6 km, since we don't run AFT, so 6 and 3.7 is actually quite nice, since these are the two auras that you have. You have 3.7 and 6, and very useful in this sense. Propulsion mod, now if you do have an additional speed boost, it doesn't hurt putting it on the Akizuki. The Akizuki is quite a slow destroyer. I mean, max speed 34.6. This is with, I'm pretty sure this is with a flag. Yeah, this is with a speed flag. So having a longer duration speed boost certainly isn't bad. If you can't afford to spare one though, just run the engine upgrade so you don't end up losing engine as often. Faster rudder shift, unlike many other DDs where you can get away with running acceleration. The rudder shift on the Akatsuki is not good enough. So steering gears, absolutely, since your turning circle is also quite terrible, this helps compensate for this weakness. And finally, concealment, so you can actually sneak up and get close enough to be able to use these guns. So you can actually contest capture points with your 5.9 km concealment. Now, captain points wise, here of course we get to the new build. If you're starting a new captain and you're still leveling, I'll go over this in the order of priority. First of all, preventive maintenance, followed by last stand, followed by survivability expert. I think it's much more important than demolition expert, because staying alive means a lot more damage and a lot more utility than just fire chance. So go survivability expert first, then you go concealment expert, and then you go IFHE. As 14 points you want IFHE. This is such a raw damage increase against pretty much all types of ships for this guy. And well, I'll link you guys, as I mentioned, I'll link you guys my previous commentary where you can see just how strong IFHE is fighting other DDs. So this is still a bread and butter perk for the Akizuki. It has simply gotten stronger in this patch. Once you have that, go for AR, faster gun reload, faster torpedo reload, yes please, and finally with the last 3 points, demolition expert, to further increase the utility this ship has against all targets. Since you want to be using the HE a lot on many different targets, increasing the fire chance by 2% is a huge boon, considering we're talking about having a 5% fire chance with flags at this point, so increasing it from 5 to 7 is certainly a very significant difference, or a significant change. Flag wise, I would say priority 1 is probably Sierra Mike, faster speed, because once again speed is one of the major drawbacks of this destroyer. I would detonation, if you had detonations, I don't really care too much if I detonate at this point. I don't mind the additional flags. Fire chance, very good on this ship, since you have such a fast rate of fire, and increasing it by just 1% of course greatly increases how often you start fires. Faster cooldown on consumables, and after that pretty much just XP bonus flags, because there's no real other big boons. The exception being maybe November Echo, aka better AA, because as I mentioned before, the AA values on this ship are very good, so a 10% increase to an already high value is of course quite significant. So that is something you might want to use on it. I personally don't bother, because I find the AA to be enough, and most of the time carriers don't really want to be hovering planes near an Akizuki, because well, they'll just end up losing them eventually, quite quickly in fact. Anyway, that was my updated Akizuki build. The differences of course are, in the previous build I ran RPF, and I did not run AR, and I instead had priority target and RPF. And while that build is certainly still viable if you don't want to change it, with the buffs to IFHE and basically HE becoming more viable against multiple targets, I have decided to build upon this new strength by adding Demolition Expert and adding AR to further increase the power of this new strength, and thus making the Akizuki more capable of dealing damage to multiple different targets, this time including battleships thanks to the increased fire chance. Anyway, that was my updated Akizuki build. I will probably be returning with some more commentaries on the ship at some point, since while I am pretty damn happy with this build, I still like to test builds that I recommend quite extensively. But that's sometime in the future. I hope you guys enjoyed it.